Welcome to 30 Minutes of Faith. We're very glad to have Bruce Anderson with us today. He's a friend who wears several hats, and we'll talk about that. I'll just start by saying he is active in public affairs with the LDS Church. But one of the first things I'd like to hear is, how did you come to the Pioneer Heritage Foundation group that you're working with?
Well, actually, going back when I was younger, I always had an affinity for history. I'm third generation Californian. Was born in Glendale, California, raised in Anaheim in the San Gabriel area. Growing up in San Gabriel, where I went to high school, we were just down the street from the San Gabriel Mission. Always had, starting from fourth grade, a great interest in the missions of California and the settling of the California, which carried over into my degree in college into political science and international relations, and always had a great place in my heart for California history and for the dynamics that the state brings to the rest of the United States.
How did you end up here in Sacramento?
Well, actually, my dad was an executive in the aerospace industry. At the end of the space race and the Vietnam War, he was faced with a decision: do I downsize? Do I stay in the industry? He ended up starting his own business, which grew for a number of years in the early 70s. In 1980, he actually bought the franchise rights to what is now Jiffy Lubes here in the Sacramento area and moved our whole company to Sacramento. And there we actually made a diversion, never became franchise owners of the Jiffy Lube franchises, but actually made a move into marketing and promotional products and incentives, so which we now service. I now have children working in the business, so we're now our third generation business of well over 40 years being in the business. So since 1980, we've been here in Sacramento.
Is your father still alive?
He's not. He passed away about 20 years ago.
Your mother?
My mother just recently passed away last year. So.
You have brothers and sisters?
I do. I have a sister that is deceased, and I have an older brother.
And children?
I have 4 children and 8 grandchildren.
And that's a kick.
That's a great job.
It is a great job. I really, really enjoy it. How about the Pioneer Heritage as it relates to the Mormon people in Northern California?
Well, it's a fairly rich history, and the California Pioneer Heritage Foundation was founded a number of years ago under the direction of Dennis Holland, who is a historian from the Placerville area and has been active in Northern California pioneer history research for a number of years. The foundation raises money and then donates money to various pioneer projects, not only projects that connect with Mormon pioneers, but also anything that has to do with pioneer. Like recently, the foundation was a major sponsor of the African American Family History Seminar and donated money, time, and resource because the importance of knowing your family history and the resources that go with that.
One of the things that I have a strong opinion about, in having watched our children and our grandchildren, was I grew up in a community where we were all Caucasian. Our children grew up in a community where there began to be lots of different cultures and nationalities. Our grandchildren now are sort of minority in their classes and everywhere else. And one of the things that I noticed when I was a teenager, young adult, I could look at you and say, well, your skin's a little different tone or whatever, and you talk a little different, or you might dress a little different. Our grandchildren, they don't see that at all. They bring their friends over. Grandpa, I want you to meet, whoever, and he or she might be from some culture or some country, in some instances that are new countries just in the last 20 or 25 years. And I really, really like that. And so the heritage of it all the heritage of all, wherever we live, some of these people are coming to California, just starting their California heritage, right?
That's correct. And especially here in Sacramento, it's one of the most, as Time Magazine said a number of years ago, probably the most diverse community in the United States. But with that comes a very a community that works together well also, as you know, being president of the Interfaith Council. And so, yes, there's new California history to be discovered. But what's interesting about past California history is it's very rich of what's happened. The foundation actually is involved now with a project with the city and county of Los Angeles to restore a monument off of Elvira Street, which is rich in Hispanic, in order to have money and rebuild for to build a monument there, or not build a monument, but redo a monument that has sat idle and in disrepair for a number of years. So the city of Los Angeles, or the county of Los Angeles, has commissioned $1.5 million to go back, look at the site, and start the process, which the foundation's been involved with. So,
in my property management hat, not too long ago out on East Bidwell, we set a stone in place out by one of the LDS meeting houses that has a plaque going on it that describes one of the diggings, one of the gold rush diggings in that area of Folsom, to describe who it was and why it was and where it was and all those other sorts of things. And that information was nearly brand new to me, and I thought I understood California history a little bit, but that particular part of that was just brand new to me. And
yeah, and you bring up a really interesting point on that. It's the Rhodes diggings.
Yes.
And it's a fairly new discovery that had to be authenticated. The city of Folsom for a number of years had been trying to authenticate the authenticity of the mine because it was kind of a hidden mine. And actually, in fact, we're not going to go back and rewrite California history, but that was actually the original gold discovery site, not only, which was very close to where you put the plaque.
Right.
And because of the Rhodes digging, it was kind of kept quiet. And the reason is Rhodes, who was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, had discovered the gold. And he alerted Brigham Young, who had just came into Utah with the Mormon pioneers, that he had discovered this gold. Brigham Young said, please mine it, send it back, because we're entire destitute in the valley in Utah. And so many of those Rhodes diggings went back to Utah and became part of what was called the Utah Mint. And then they had money actually to exchange in the valley there. So a few years later was the actual gold discovery at Marshall, which was also part with members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that were there with Marshall that actually helped in the gold discovery there also.
The old Mormon battalion.
That's correct.
Over there. Do you know, in Africa a couple of years ago, Sean and I were having dinner one night and we're talking to the waiter that was helping us. And he thought California he was well educated, but he was working as a waiter because he could make more money doing that than teaching school. But he thought California represented 3 or 4 things. And one of them, he talked about the Catholic missions. He had read and studied a whole bunch about the Catholic missions. He thought the gold rush was a big deal. He thought the railroad was a big deal. And then he wanted to know if we personally knew the Beach Boys and Elvis Presley and, all of those people. So, he saw Hollywood and music and all of the other kinds of things. When you think about it, there's a place for each one of them, and one had to start first. And we're lucky that we're a state that lives with an ocean, and we have a lot of beaches and places along the way. But is there one of those greater than the other?
Well, I don't think so, because history always evolves. And that's probably one of the downturns of the information society. We hear the term low information voters or low information people. People like their news and little snippets. In fact, Sacramento Bee just recently has summarized their stories instead of giving you the full story.
They're not even doing the baseball box scores.
Yes, which I was totally disappointed
So was I.
in as far as I looked at that. But what happens with this evolution, is you raise a generation that doesn't know. And history is so rich. It was like at the beginning of the drought a couple years ago when Folsom Lake came to a catastrophic level. It uncovered on Mormon Island, not a gold site, but a community that had serviced about 1,200 people there. Thousands of people from Northern California came to see the relics and see the people there. The Heritage Foundation has living history reenactors that came, and people were thrilled as these people took on the people of the 1800s and discovered there. And people had written emails saying how grateful they were that their children could learn that part of California history that they might only get a sentence or a small paragraph about in today's world.
Now that Mormon Island and Folsom Proper and all that stuff, did I not read that a African American cemetery had been relocated or moved or better identified or something? I can't remember.
Yeah, and I believe I had just found out about that also. We also found out about a African American couple that lived in Coloma at the time of gold discovery site that was, through their written history, one of the most popular cabins there for the gold miners to visit. So the foundation now is hopefully working on that because they're in the midst of a project with Coloma on they're moving the gold digging sites to their original location there, and the foundation is partnering with the state of California to make sure that the authenticity of the area is correct. So,
and I suppose, in fairness, history that we have is based on whoever wrote it. Right?
That's true.
So now we can go back and rediscover as we
Right.
go along.
And which is the interesting thing about the Rhodes diggings was it took time to it took time to figure out if that was correct.
No, and it usually will. Time is something that takes time. Let's jump a couple of things. In the past, we've had helping hands in the community where a day was set aside and we went out and cleaned and helped and all of those other things. And that's been refocused a little bit. And I know you're involved with some of that. Can you talk to us about that?
I can. For the last year, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has published a new website called justserve.org. Just Serve is totally interdenominational. You don't even have to be a member of the church to go on and sign on at Just Serve. What it does is it brings community organizations, food banks, different people that desperately need volunteers. And as you register, you can go on and put your zip code in and find projects that you can volunteer on in that area. And it's been a tremendous thing. Recently, Habitat for Humanity almost had to close their doors down for their store that they had to raise money. Because of Just Serve, now it's generating, by my understanding, over $60,000 a month that goes out to help build and help the community. And plus, in 2014, Just Serve was part of the large Mac Road redevelopment project, which focused on over 5,000 members of the communities from all sorts of faiths on a redevelopment project for the Mac Road area.
You know, in interfaith, Bruce, one of the real buzzwords is outreach. You know, reach out to other people. Don't worry about, so much who they are. Just reach out to them and let's see what we can do. And there's so many good things. And one of the things that happened to us a year or two ago, there was an elementary downtown that was filled full of children that belonged mostly to single parents, mostly single mothers, but some single fathers. And those kids would go to school, and the only shelter and food that they got that was consistent and regular was at school. When they got back home, sometimes the older brother or sister was caring for the younger ones, and mom would get home from her job and fix top ramen or something, and that's what they'd do for supper. And so that school, and we helped put together backpacks where those children would have food that they could take home on the weekend that was easily prepared, didn't require a fire, a lot of other things, so that they could have nutritious and good food during the weekend. And then when they came back on Monday, the teachers and the staff would spend the rest of the week reloading for the next time. That particular program blessed me enormously to see those little faces of kindergartners and first and second and third graders. We go home at night and have a snack, sit down, do whatever we want, and haven't missed a meal in a long time. Sometimes they don't even hardly get anything to eat during the week if they didn't go to school. So that helping, that serving, and that is so important. Now, you also work with public affairs in the LDS community. Tell us a little bit about that.
Public affairs, you talk about outreach. It's basically working and finding areas of common interest between political leaders, religious leaders, people of influence in the community, finding those common areas, much the same as the Interfaith Council does, including working with the Interfaith Council.
Yes.
Finding those projects, finding those situations that will enhance the communities, will bless people's lives, will follow the admonition of the Savior Jesus Christ in blessing other people's lives, that every person is your neighbor, regardless of their faith or their belief, where it's totally apolitical. We have a former congressman that works on our committee that says this is the best job of his life because he can finally be apolitical, and it doesn't matter. And as we've worked with those state senators, state assemblymen in the state capitol, we have found very much areas of common ground. Most of them say, including city councilmen, county supervisors, this is very unique that you come to us telling us that you can help us, where most of the people come and say, what can you do for us? And I think that's a common thing that we're probably finally starting to turn the corner on. The Sacramento City Council has been tremendous on many. Vice Mayor Alan Warren has been tremendous in kind of spearheading some of those things.
He's a good guy.
Absolutely.
He's a good guy. My father used to tell me in childhood, do good for good's sake. There doesn't have to be any reason except good. That's, the only reason you need. Wake up in the morning and go do good for good's sake. And the people who do that, the people who do step up and say, let us help, we can do, everybody's made happier and more content, and life is better. I don't know why we can't come to that a little quicker and a little easier.
And to that point, John, the city of Folsom last year held their first community day of service, which was the city council and the mayor put together a coalition of community religious leaders, had a day of community service. That was phenomenal. One group worked with the food bank there, collected from, I think it was like 2,500 homes in the area of Folsom. Wow. Over $130,000 worth of food that the food bank desperately needed to go there. They sorted it out, gave it. The food bank was so appreciative of it. But what we're seeing is the cities are seeing the benefit of saying that people want to help. They don't want to be clustered in their group. They want to get outside and they want to help and they want to be part of their community. And you might not think Folsom is a needy community, but when a food bank says, yes, we do have homeless, we do have people that don't get food, and what they don't use, it goes to other areas to help feed those who are needy.
Now, this is a little bit of a loaded question, Bruce, but do you think personally there are still more good people on the earth than bad?
As I've been serving in this position, I would say so. I'd say that the news cycles that we see in today's world focus on things that a lot of times are sensational. They grab to get our attention. We hear a lot about the bad things. But as I work through these things, I see, and even in legislatures and those, they might have a political agenda, but bottom line, when you get them in their private moments, they still have children, they still have family, they still have situations where that's the most important thing. And I think that absolutely there are way more good people. In fact, the newspaper in Oakland that's run by an African-American, Paul Cobb, is working on a good news insert that will go nationally through all sorts of African-American newspapers to say, here's the good news that we have.
I visited with an apostolic group last week who are sort of new to America. They've been living in North Africa and the Middle East and, for centuries. And they're in the United States now looking for freedom and other good things. One of the things one man said to me is, I'm not too concerned about me, but I'm really concerned about my children and my grandchildren. I want them to be safe and happy and secure and pleasant and have, enjoy a good life. He wasn't looking for riches and wealth. He just wanted peace and happiness and all of those other sorts of things. And that comes through service. People who serve are happier people, are they not?
Totally happy. In fact, I just heard of a story the other day talking about Africa, about a small village that had an orphanage that had no running water, that people of South Africa got together, went there, and the miracle of it, of the whole situation, was they had not had running water for 2 years. As the group showed up to work in the village, they had brought trucks and to travel 25 miles to get water to clean the orphanage. As the caravan left to get the water, a few minutes later, spigots that had not had water miraculously had water flowing. They called, said, come back. They've had running water ever since. And we might think that's a simple thing in our society, but what a blessing, what a miracle that happened to that village because people came to serve.
And I suppose in our homes right now, if we turned the water off, we would not be happy campers.
We would be lost.
Turned, yeah.
That's correct.
That's a nice story. Now, do you see your children and grandchildren being interested in serving and doing and helping with heritage? And
they've been great, yes. I have one daughter that loves to do this and has been out in the forefront. Work, I think it was St. Vincent's in Rancho Cordova, took her children to work at the distribution over Thanksgiving of turkeys. And my little granddaughter, who is 13 years old, said, Papa, she goes, people were crying as I was helping them take things to their car or help pulling food. So to get out and serve and have your kids serve, they don't see the other side of life a lot of times, and how blessed they are, and they should be imparting their time. And you're right, they are happier. They're happier and better rounded children.
Do you know, last Thanksgiving weekend, I was serving with a group downtown, and I said to a man who I would judge to be about 50, when was the very first time you had a slice of turkey and potatoes and gravy? And he said, right now. And it stunned me. I mean, I couldn't think of anything to say. I mean, I wanted to sort of scream out, really? Or are you joking or yanking my chain? But he was very sincere. And I raced back to my childhood when we'd go to my grandparents, and Grandma had a big turkey fixed and all the stuff ready to go, and we'd eat till we could hardly move and lay on the couch and sprawl out, you know. So what will be 100 years from now, what will the people say their heritage and story was in Sacramento in 2015?
That's a great hypothetical question. I wish I had a crystal ball to answer it. From my perspective, I hope that in the way that the world is now, that people will look back and say, we lived in a community that had all sorts of different religions, all sorts of different heritage, because we are a great melting pot here in Sacramento, and that we built a great city on cooperation, on service, and in those areas that we found areas of common interest, that we were able to build a city here based on those values that blessed everybody, regardless of what your belief system is.
And whose responsibility is to make certain that their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, I mean, how do we go about that? Do we just tell them over the supper table, you got to do more, or what?
No, I think what we need to do is get involved in volunteer organizations, Just Serve, Red Cross, other areas that you're going to be able to touch lives. The Interfaith Council is a great place to get involved with. I can't remember, John, you need to tell me, how many sleeping bags have you had donated for
I think in
the
the last
homeless?
5 years, we've done about 5,000 of them.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when younger people and anybody gets involved in that thing, that puts an imprint in their mind that that's what I'm supposed to do. That's how I can be a productive member of society.
In your opinion, do you think 100 years from now our great-grandchildren will wrestle similar things to what we wrestle in our society?
I think if anybody that's a purveyor of history knows that history cycles. The circumstances might change. We have technology that is going at warp speed right now, but I think the basic values of service and family and our relationships that we have with other has stayed the same since the beginning of time. And I think that's an important thing.
What's your wife's role in all of this as it relates to you?
But she's a great support, always has been a great support for a number of years. In our church, they have a women's organization called the Relief Society. Their whole charter is that of service. Service to not only women in their ward, but in their church responsibilities, but also those that are in the community. And so she's a great example to our family and our children in giving service to those who are in need.
Now, as it relates to churches, for instance, Sacramento's long been a Catholic community, and the bishop of the diocese is a very important role. But there are so many other faiths now that have strong leaders, the rabbis and the imams and so many others. How is leadership doing in your faith?
Our leadership's doing fine. In fact, Richard Montgomery, that works on public affairs, is part of what is called Court and the Clergy, which is a combination of the state of California recognizing the role of clergy, not only in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but also other faiths. Last year, they had their first seminar held at a Jewish synagogue. This next year, they're having Dallin Oaks, who's an apostle in our church and one of the foremost constitutional experts on religious freedom, plus Anthony Kennedy coming here to Sacramento later this year in a combined meeting to be able to talk through these things on what the role of clergy is and also the courts to help society be better.
And we can't, it's not possible to have too much dialogue amongst our groups, is it?
We have to have dialogue between our groups.
I enjoy the ecumenical approach in the Protestant religions. They want to talk amongst themselves and talk seriously and press after, firm issues. So do we just sort of hope that in all of our faiths there'll be 3 or 4 people who will be actively engaged and that'll help the rest of us come along, or how do we handle that?
Yeah, I think you'll always have those leaders that will come up that will recognize the right way. But whatever your faith or religion is, there's always the goodness that's being taught toward your fellow man, and hopefully those leaders won't go away, and our history will be rich going forward.
If you can wave a magic wand to make something good or better, what would it be?
My wish would be that people would look beyond the little snippets of news or history that they have, that they find out their own roots through their family history. They find out the history of the area that they live in, that they become involved in the community. It will make it all better for all of us.
Thank you, Bruce.
Sure.
Nice
Thank
to
you for
visit
having
with you.
me.
Appreciate you coming
Sure.
by. Okay.
Thank you.
Keep the faith.